magazine, they were published like this. It said, while in jail, Bonhoeffer would write letters to his fiancée. The majority of those letters reflected overwhelming courage and inflexible faith. In his last message to Maria, who was his fiancée, written at Christmas time in 1944, he said, "What is happiness? It depends so little on the circumstances. It depends really only on that which happens inside of a person." And then 4 months later, he lost his life at a concentration camp in Bavaria. And Bonhoeffer was a lover of the Psalms, and so riddled throughout his letters to Maria was this, the focus of this psalm, which says this: "As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower of the field. For the wind passes over it, and it is gone. But the steadfast love of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting." And I think this sentiment is awesomely summed up by another Holocaust survivor named Corrie ten Boom. You've probably heard of her too. And her famous line is that Jesus, you don't know that Jesus is all that you need until he is all that you have. And so we see here that Paul has joy from a prison cell. Paul's joy breathes the same air as suffering. And it's incredible because he is so free in that jail cell. He's so free. Bonhoeffer is so free in that jail cell. And sort of the flip side of this conversation is us who are out of jail. Us who have access to many, many things in this world, who have freedom, given to us, handed to us. And sort of the poster child for this outside of having access to everything all the time, wise king, is a guy named Solomon, who wrote Ecclesiastes. And what's great about Solomon is he tried out everything and then he told us about it. He was given wisdom and he tried it all out. And so one of the places we find a long list of the things he tried out is in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 4 through 11. And it says this, listen to this long laundry list of things. It's pretty awesome. "I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me." That's confident. "In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun." And so we see that Paul's free in a prison cell, and Solomon's given everything, and he's created his own prison for himself. He's not free at all, even though he has access to everything. And so that's why we see Jesus. That's why we see Jesus right before he became a prisoner himself pray on the Mount of Olives, "Not my will, but yours be done." And that's why 3 days later, after it was so dark, after all hope had left earth, that Jesus could bring his resurrection hope to the world, and to change history forever, and to really show us, as the sermon is titled here, how to get your shine on. And so Paul here, he's joy in a jail cell. He's shining. In other places we see that Paul is converting people in the jail cell, his prison captives, because he's shining so bright in that dark space. And, now this joy that he has, he's telling his first fruits in Europe, this first small church that is living in a Roman Empire that is praising a whole different kind of religion. They are amidst an empire that is all about the cult of Caesar. And what Caesar did, this Roman, this Roman conqueror, this Roman, create deserts out of the people that he was fighting, just totally conquering everything around him. And he would spread pamphlets about his victories in battle. And they were entitled, in the Greek they're called the Euangelion, which in English translates to the good news. But this good news was not the good news of Jesus Christ. This good news was a pamphlet that said, Caesar is Lord. Caesar is Savior. Trust in Caesar. Trust in his might. Trust in his strength. And the world around was trusting in this Caesar. And then Paul, from a dark jail cell, tells this church, be a light. Be pure. Do everything you can to not complain. Because if you can do that, then this 20, 30 will shine like stars. And what we know from the advantage of history is that they too, Philippian church, they too got their shine on. And they began a movement, an early church movement that grew and grew and grew and grew and has led us to this moment today. With two stories of awesome times where I saw people get their shine on or heard about it. And the first one is one of my favorite spiritual guides, person, a hero of the faith. And you probably all know her name, Mother Teresa. One of my favorite stories about Mother Teresa is, there's a story of this pesky reporter. And Mother Teresa, when she was 14 years old, she got a direct call from God. She heard from God's voice, and she was sent to the slums of Calcutta in India, one of the poorest of the poor, to care for people who were literally dying in the streets. And she would walk down with her Sisters of Mercy every day and pick these men and women up off of the streets and bring them to care for them and to bandage their wounds and to restore them back to life. And she spent day in, day out doing things we could probably not imagine, the amazing service that she was doing. And this pesky reporter came to her after about 15 years of her work and to nail her. You've been doing this work with the poor in Calcutta for 15 years. And if you look at the statistics, if you look at these stats, the poverty rates in Calcutta are way worse now than they ever have been before. So everything that you've been doing, nothing's changed. Mother Teresa, in brilliant fashion, says to him, it is not our calling in this life to be successful, only to be faithful. And so we see and we understand it is fidelity, it is the care for the things of God amidst tragedy, amidst the suffering that brings us to this place of joy. It is not the suffering itself, but it's our ability to heed the one thing, to care for God alone, above all else, that is the source of sustainable Christian joy. And what's amazing is that also Mother Teresa's letters have been published post-mortem, and all of this wonderful service that she did in her public life, we've now discovered, it's come out in recent news, that Mother Teresa had some struggles of her own. She had what the Catholic spiritual tradition would call the dark night of the soul. And so when she was 14 and she heard from God, that was one of the last times where she really felt spiritually fulfilled and enriched from God. And she would write letters to her spiritual mentor saying, I just don't feel, I can't feel God. I can't really taste that rich, true joy that I had at one point. The quote on the back of this grouping of letters reads like this. Listen to this quote. If I ever, this is Mother Teresa, become a saint, I will be one of darkness. I will continually be absent from heaven to light the way for those in darkness on earth. Mother Teresa knew how to get her shine on. Amen. The last story that I have is when I was 23, and I didn't actually know that Jim and Cindy Ludwig would be here today, but they made it into the story sort of. Cindy is the head of a preschool at Malibu Presbyterian Church. As a little kid, I was in her preschool. And so anyways, when I graduated from college, her preschool supports this orphanage called Light in Africa, and it's in Tanzania, Africa. And, in the spirit of making sure that the crafts and all the fun things and the funds were going to the right places in Light in Africa, she sort of recruited me to go over and to spend time in this orphanage in Tanzania, Africa. And I kind of went by myself. I had one other guy, but it sort of felt like I was by myself. And as I got there, I was very idealistic coming out of college, sort of, fight the poverty, all that kind of stuff as I got there. And I remember getting there and sort of seeing things I had never seen in my upbringing before, and really starting to feel a sense of isolation and disconnect to the community where I was. And after about a week of feeling pretty scared and isolated, I met this young man. He was a high school orphan named Kevin. And Kevin had no parents. He had lost both of his parents to HIV/AIDS, and as most of the children in the orphanage had. And he really had nothing in this world. He shared everything with all of the other orphans. But we started to develop this friendship. Our friendship was based off of basically cultural exchange and me needing to survive, basically. And he spoke both English and Swahili, and so we would do these cultural exchanges where I would take him to town and show him how to learn the internet, set up his Facebook and, all these fun internet things, his email accounts and whatnot. And then on the other side, over there, he would take me to the river and show me where the monkeys were at. And he would, teach me how to wash my clothes in the river. And so we engaged in this sort of deep, meaningful friendship. And I remember one day we were getting ready to go to town. And going to town meant getting on what is called the Dala Dala. And the Dala Dala is like a 15-passenger van that usually has about 35 people on it, and some chickens, and there's not a lot of deodorant in Africa, so you kind of get a vision of what that's like. And so you probably have sitting on somebody's lap or whatever. And it costs about $1 American money to ride on the Dala Dala. And so Mama Lynn wanted to encourage responsibility in Kevin. Mama Lynn was the woman who ran the orphanage. And so she gave him the dollar amount to ride on the Dala Dala. And